remarks. Mr. Fadli, the floor is yours.
And good evening to all of you. Good morning for Raina. And thank you very much for attending this webinar, colleagues. It is an honor to welcome you to this webinar today, focusing on second National Determined Contribution, or second NDC. It's also known as NDC 3.0. We know that for second NDC will guide our climate action from 2031 to 2035 period. And right now is being finalized, and hopefully again, will be announced soon. And despite all the process of the Indonesian government in preparing the NDC, the question is whether our NDC reflecting or responding to urgency to address climate crisis. We can feel that our climate is changing, and the global climate crisis is no longer a distant threat in just a paper. It is life and daily reality for many Indonesians. Our geography, which is the country with 1,000 islands, make us one of the most vulnerable nation in the world. We see it in the rising tides along the north coast of Java, or we call Pantura, where sea levels are increasing by an estimated 5 centimeters per year. They also urge the government to plan this giant seawall in order to address this problem. This threat endangers over 50 million people and vast swath of our national industry and the rice field that feed our nation. And this is again how government responded by initiating project like giant seawall. We also feel that shifting in monsoon season bring unpredictable, devastating flood in some places, and crippling, prolonged drought. It's impacting our food security and the livelihood of our farmers and fisheries. This is just some of the impact that we see as the climate is changing. The scientific consensus is clear. We must peak global emission immediately and achieve deep cuts this decade to keep 1.5-degree goal within reach. For Indonesia, as a developing nation and a major global player as well as global emitters, this urgency translates into a moral and existential mandate to act decisively. So this is bring us to the core question. This ISR kept saying, why must Indonesia second NDC be ambitious? The answer lies in the three key pillars. First, the ambition for national sovereignty. We believe that a strong NDC is an investment in our sovereignty. It protects our coastal communities, secure our food, water, and energy supplies, and ensure our national resilience against disaster risks. If we remember our commitment to forestry and other land use, or the FOLU Net Sink 2030, is a globally pioneering effort to ensure that our forests and mangrove, which is our vast natural carbon sinks, absorb more emission than they release. So we really must strengthen this. effort, and also add more measures in order to strengthen our NDC target. So high ambition is not just about um, uh, reducing emission, but it is about economic competitiveness. We believe that climate action is economic opportunity, and second NDC must be a green roadmap to future prosperity. If you look at the energy sectors, which currently one of the largest contributor to our emissions, we need to accelerate its transition. We must aggressively pursue our renewable energy target, aiming for higher end of what been projected now 27 to 33% of the energy mix by 2035. In ISR calculations to be aligned with 1.5-degree growth, our renewable energy mix must be at least 40% by 2030 and close to 55% by 2035. Therefore, any target that lower than that can be considered that not ambitious and not consistent with Paris Agreement goal. But if we have ambitious renewable energy target, it also can attract green investment. It can avoid the risk of stranded asset from fossil fuel reliance and make us a leader in clean energy technology, where we can utilize our massive solar, wind, geothermal, hydro potentials. This is very important. And the third high ambitions of NDC is actually show our global leadership. It's kind of a diplomacy tools. As a major economy and archipelagic nation, Indonesia climate commitment set the tone for the entire global South. This is the time to lead the global South with a climate ambition. We have responsibility not just to our own people, but to the world. A progressive and ambitious second NDC could solidify our position as a responsible and influential voices in these multilateral forums. We must demonstrate to the world that development and climate protection are not mutually exclusive, but interdependent. We have the resources. We have the forests. We have a pit land. We have abundant renewable energy resources. We have a smart minds. And actually, the political will, as demonstrated by our government in the different occasions. I want to remind everyone that a few months ago, during the annual speech of the president, he mentions about that Indonesia should pursue the energy transition to leave fossil fuel within 10-15 years timeline. So this is just a show of a political commitment, but needs to be translated into an action plan. And one of this should be seen in our second NDC. So the second NDC is more than a list of targets. It is actually the blueprint for a fairer, cleaner, and more resilient Indonesia. So it requires coherence, consistency, and above all, collective execution across all ministry, the business, private sector, civil society. So I hope by hearing today the presentation, especially from Raina, which I know just published a paper about how the ambitious NDC for Indonesia looks like, we can use remaining time to encourage our government to have more ambition target than what they currently have in the draft of NDC. We know one of the draft from the draft that actually the peaking emission shift to 2035, not 2030. And this is very, very important. I think we should push the emission peak 2030 even before 2030 to avoid all the high costs of addressing our emissions. Again, I would like to thank to everybody, especially thank you to Raina. I know it's very early in the morning in Maryland in the US. And also to all of you that joined this webinar. Maybe it's quite late for you. Maybe if you are in the eastern part of Indonesia, it's 2 hours. It's already 9 p.m. But I hope that this event could help us understand what the ambitious climate action looks like and give you insight and again take actions in the remaining time to make Indonesia NDC as ambitious as possible. Thank you very much, and let the dialogue begin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fabi, for your insightful opening remarks and for setting the tone for today's discussion. Now, to lead us through the presentations and discussions, I'm pleased to hand over the sessions to our moderator, Mr. Arif Rosadi, Climate and Energy Diplomacy Program Manager at IESR. Mr. Arif, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Angga. Hi, good evening and good morning, everyone. My name is Arif Rosadi. I will be your moderator in this webinar. And tonight we have two distinguished experts who will share their perspective on Indonesia climate commitment. But before we come to discussion and presentation, let me introduce to you their brief bio. The first we have Dr. Rina Cui. She is the Associate Director, Associate Research Professor at the Center for Global Sustainability, University of Maryland School of Public Policy. Dr. Rina is expert in integrated assessment modeling, energy transition, national climate ambition assessment and strategy, and US-China climate engagement. And she has been appointed as lead author for the IPCC 7th Assessment Report Working Group 3. Her research focus on the economy-wide transition pathway of key emitting countries, fossil fuel phase-out strategies, and societal implication. And also, Dr. Rina also hold joint appointment at the Joint Global Change Research Institute, a collaboration between the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and the University of Maryland. Dr. Rina, thank you for coming. And we also have Delima Ramadhani. Delima is our climate policy coordinator. She is responsible for coordinating scientific analysis to measure and evaluate climate change mitigation targets, policies, and action, and comparing the results with globally agreed Paris Agreement targets. And without further ado, first I will give the opportunity to Dr. Rina to share her insight. Dr. Rina, the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes.
For the introduction, and really a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Fabi. Thank you, IESR, for organizing today's event. I think as you mentioned in your remarks, it is a critical opportunity and both for global climate and for Indonesia. So let me share my screen. Yeah, we recently published a new report on the high ambition pathways for Indonesia 2035 NDC and net zero emissions. So that will kind of be the main content I will introduce today. But before I jump into Indonesia, I also want to give some background about the overall country ambition assessment work that our team at CGS has been doing. Because of the NDC process under Paris Agreement is really nationally driven, it's very diverse. So there's an analytical challenge about how we define and benchmark what high ambition and good targets look like across different countries. So our work takes a bottom-up approach using consistent, robust, and integrated model to look at that for major emitting countries that also balances between high ambition that align with global 1.5 net zero goals, but also balance on plausibility based on individual country context and priorities. This is providing some complementary information compared to a lot of the top-down global analysis of 1.5. So I think this is important information to provide to both the research and policy community. In addition to the economy-wide pathway, we also highlight sector transition, policy action, also trying to expand to have more subnational details for each country, how to deliver the high ambition pathway. Because of the tool we're using, we can also look at the aggregate global outcomes and also how the possibility of keeping the 1.5 within reach. So last month, together with the Indonesia report, we also launched a new website on the country climate ambition. The first batch include 12 major emitting countries listed here. I won't go to the website now, but I think this is a screenshot. You can click on each of the country where we show our high ambition pathway, the target for 2035 for those 12 countries. But you can also to a detailed country page for each of them, which provides the latest summary, but also we hope to regularly update those information to provide a kind of a timely resources for the community. So now moving to Indonesia. So among the countries we look at, Indonesia definitely have a unique situation in terms of the emissions profile. So here we're showing kind of the historical trend of Indonesia's emission breakdown by the different greenhouse gases, but also the major sector. It's very clear kind of the emissions are kind of evenly allocated between LULUCF, the land use CO2. The second part is the methane emission, and also aggregately on the energy CO2, which means like Indonesia have to pay attention, address all of those major sources. And we do see the kind of the trend latest are still growing. There more fluctuation with the land part, but the other sources are also having a rebound rapidly after COVID. I think Fabi mentioned there's a strong political will for Indonesia to enhance climate ambition, which is very exciting. But also there have been several barriers or limitations in terms of the progress. For example, not a lot of falling short on renewable deployment. Currently, there are some different competing uses of land. Also, in terms of industrial development, there are some domestic emission implications that we need to pay attention. I think while the target covers all greenhouse gases, there's a lack of clarity on policy strategies, especially on non-CO2 gases like methane. So the current NDC target, the first one for updated in 2022, which has the 2030 target with the conditional or unconditional scenarios, a reduction below the business as usual. Also have net zero goals by 2060. I mentioned the coverage is great for whole economy, whole greenhouse gases. But what we did is a comparison of the first NDC targets to what the emission look like by sector in 2022. Here it's very kind of interesting to see across sectors. You can see the target actually allocate a lot of the reduction to agriculture and the FOLU sector. So all of these data are based on the Indonesia inventory and also the first NDC. And then for the other sector, it kind of allow a rapid growth in terms of energy, waste, IPPU, and also end up having a 41% increase from 2022 under the unconditional scenario target and the 18% increase under the conditional target. So that's just kind of interesting to observe how the reduction is allocated across sector. For our analysis, we're using an integrated assessment model. The key input for our model is population and GDP, which will drive the demand on energy services, and then energy and the model will balance out how the supply will look like. So just to explain the two scenarios we're looking in this analysis, where we started with the social economic pathway 2, SSP2, which is kind of there are 5 SSPs together, but SSP2 is kind of the middle of the road scenario. We're starting with that for population, but also have a variation on the GDP side. The low GDP is SSP2 default, but we also have alternative high GDP growth, especially higher growth rate in the near term. This is 5-year average, so annual could reach to the 8% as suggested by some of the policy interest, which you can see the high GDP really is higher than the highest SSP5 scenario. So just to jump into kind of the economy-wide pathway results for a second. So here we are seeing the total greenhouse gas emissions, including LULUCF, which is the black line here from the historical data, where the breakdown, the area part is the non-LULUCF part. So also the dot showing where the first NDC indicating about the economy-wide growth. So for our scenario where the two lines are actually very close in terms of low GDP, high GDP, but the overall kind of a number we are looking at 46 to 49% reduction in the total greenhouse gas emissions by 2035 from 2023. And just to further break down between the first column is the including LULUCF number, where we also have a excluding LULUCF, which is the panel B here. Again, you can see there's also a reduction from today, but non-LULUCF emission peak by 2025 in our scenario, and then start to decline after that. Where LULUCF, I think the net zero land sink by 2030, it's a pretty ambitious goal and may not be fully realistic. So we are assuming to achieve the unconditional 2030 NDC for LULUCF emission and then reach net zero before 2035. Our scenario also include a large reduction, above 30% for methane from the 2020 level. I think now going back to the sector allocation, I think this is the first two column we've seen before in the previous slide about the first NDC allocation, and the last column showing how the reduction will be achieved under our high scenario. But this percentage is to 2035. It's not a exact comparison to the first NDC, but just to give you a sense about the kind of the overall trend we're seeing in our scenario. It definitely shows a more balanced emission reduction across sector under our scenario. And actually, actually kind of an agriculture sector with a lot of non-CO2 emission are really hard to abate. We have a much smaller kind of a reduction even by 2035 compared to today. And then I think IPPU, it's industrial processes that may also have some hard to abate kind of processes now. But like energy and waste, we actually have a lot of near-term opportunities to make meaningful reduction, where we can see we have more reduction under our high ambition pathways. Just to zoom in one step further, for the energy CO2, the fossil fuel and also industrial processes emissions, we are also showing the individual sector trend under the scenario. And you can see it's very clear. There's a large reduction driven by the power sector in the near term that achieve a 35 to 44% reduction by 2035. Where industry and transport continue to grow like much slower rate through 2035, especially under the orange high GDP scenario, start to decline more rapidly after 2040. So for industry, all the captive plants, the big jump, a lot of are reflecting the existing or recent captive coal expansion, and that's where are categorized under this chart. So this is the on-grid power system, and the captive is included in the industrial sector. Where building emissions stay at relatively low level, and so I think those are just some important sector dynamic. So our analysis also, have a lot of detail about power sector. I think this also kind of a similar or kind of in line with what Fabi was saying about the, what we should expect or thinking about the solar and wind renewable deployment for Indonesia. Here we show the breakdown by technology in 2030 and 2035. Not including our two scenarios, but also comparing to the CIPP plan. So you can see there's, some variation in terms of what are the, major new builds will be needed. I think there are some changes in terms of what the coal level will look like, but there are similar trend there. But yeah, so our scenario have really high solar and wind deployment rate. And that translates to about 33 to 40 gigawatt per year, which is, seems really a lot, a big jump from what's happening so far. But just given the technology, the successful deployment in a lot of the neighboring regions, and the technology is really mature and with rapidly declining cost, we do feel like there's a great potential to accelerate the RE deployment. And coal power generation gonna contribute from 62% in 2023 to below 15% by 2035 in terms of total generation. And we actually also did a joint research with IESR in terms of how the plant-by-plant strategy may look like. There's a combination of different tailoring we can do for different type of plants. So I won't explain here, but please refer to our other research on this. I think there are a lot of interesting information there. Another key kind of a priority is to enhance the grid infrastructure so we can have more on-grid generation, do not need the coal captive plants. I think our report also this is a summary of a lot of the key policy strategies. I don't have time to go into the other sectors, but just want to highlight there are a lot of important interlinkages between, for example, industrial economic development, but how that translate to domestic emission through kind of a captive coal, but also we're thinking about biofuel, the linkage with land sector. So I think there are a lot of great detail for each of the sector in our analysis, and I will encourage people to look at the report. So I think I'll just conclude. The ongoing NDC cycle for 2035 under Paris is a really critical opportunity to catalyze enhanced ambition across all the countries. So globally, we can revert the growing trend and achieve meaningful reduction over the coming decade. And Indonesia as a major economy and a key GHG emitter, the new NDC will have important implication both for the national development and also the global ambition. So here we present our pathway. that have the overall economy reduction 46 to 49% by 2035, and also in line with achieving net zero emission by 2060. So there's a lot of important major sources. We recommend to look at them and thinking about the reduction effort across all major sources, compared to what the current NDC more heavily rely on the land sector for the near-term reduction, but allowing others to continue to grow. So lastly, kind of the critical nexus I already mentioned between energy, ending for deforestation, and industrial and economic development. That's a complex issue. I do think it does require we are taking a holistic view to the whole plan. So I think with that, I will end there. Thank you very much. I really look forward to hearing IESR's analysis and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lina, for your insight. I think one point that I want to highlight from your presentation is the high ambition pathway for Indonesia that achieved a 46 to 49 reduction in economy worldwide GHG emission by 2035 and net zero by 2060. And next, I will give opportunity to Delima to present her perspective. Delima, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Hi, thank you, Arif. And it's so interesting to see your view right now. I assume it would be economically viable for Indonesia, of course. So it's very, very ambitious. I hope you can see my screen right now. Yeah, so I will give you another insight on how actually the draft SNDC or the NDC 3.0 of Indonesia that been circulated last year in August 2024, and how is it actually against the Paris 1.5 degrees Celsius compatible pathway, whether or not it's aligned or disaligned. This is the overview how the NDC 3.0 differ from the previous NDCs. It has a different scenario, of course. We could see that the target are numerically improved, and then in SNDC we have 2 conditional target, and they also reformatted it in a better way, I would say, to compare it above or relative to the historical emission rather than the BAU. And the other update is also the coverage of the sector, adding some marine sector, and also in the industrial sector, it adds HFC gas coverage with peaking emission that Fabi also already mentioned, that it's would be in 2030, except for energy sector, but there are informations circulating around that it actually would be pushed. But we will hear about it tomorrow from the national focal point. And also the metric change, so you will also see updated historical emissions or pathway in the next draft. And here I would like to highlight that Indonesia's draft of SNDC are actually not aligned with 1.5 degrees of Celsius. What really be seen, of course, and already mentioned previously, that the unconditional target, for example, only projected emissions by 2050, which is way too late to meet Paris Agreement. And they also claim that the conditional target is aligned with Paris target, where the emission would peak by 2030, except for the energy sector. In this limited action before 2030, we would like to highlight that put huge reliance on steep reductions after 2035 to meet net zero target, which is risking not meeting the target first, and the second, to have the pathway in a very costly manner. And then the third, of course, that already highlighted as well, that the reliance of land use. The slide is not moving. I'm now in the fourth slide. It's not moving. Okay. I think to save some bandwidth, I will turn off my video and see if it's working now. Is it working? Okay, so yeah, so heavy reliance on land use change, which is the same as the previous one. It takes a lot of mitigation or measures in this sector rather than actually driving emission down in the other sector, like energy and transport, for example. And we could also see how the government then has different perspective on where is the emissions level or the trajectory that are Paris compatible or not. Based on our research in ISR, we refer to the benchmark that are calculated by the climate action tracker, and it is deemed not aligned with 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. And we will look deeper into the pathway, the gap, and the target in the next slide. So the NDC draft outlined 2030 and 2035, a little bit update on the 2030, but the most update would be, of course, in 2035 target. And for now, we calculated that the current policy, which means in these blue lines, it's reflecting that even within the current policy, the target is already easy to achieve without additional policy that are ambitious or target that are ambitious. So we take these as keeping the status quo, sadly. And we calculate here on climate action tracker, we split the rest of the economic sector with LULUCF to actually see the reductions in those sector. And this is reflecting the same trend as Raina already presented. And I would like to highlight, sadly, the target is still way above the current policy for now, and then I'll have a benchmark. Now I would like to zoom into the 1.5 compatible benchmark for conditional target that are considered by national focal point as 1.5 aligned, which we don't see the same way. We see that the emission should bend down to this level of emission around 800 in 2030 or around 720 in 2035. And this level of emission is excluding LULUCF once again. We also see that the government updated the reference year to be even lower with limited transparency on why, except for the updated global warming potentials to AR5. We're excited to hear more tomorrow. What's the reason for that? And we projected here how is it again compared to the conditional target. This is the current conditional target. It's around 91% above 2019 level, and then the draft of 2030 conditional target is updated into a little bit lower to 57 to 73% above 19 levels, while for 35 it's a little bit lower as well here, around 67 to 79 at 76% above 2019 level. And then the climate policy currently on the table could easily overachieve this. So this is a pattern that Indonesia has been doing in the last NDC as well, to keep the target way above the current policies, to make it easy to achieve, I think, for whatever reasons, which is interesting. I think it comes from the perspective that we need to have achievable target, but in the perspective of the small time window, the need to course correct, the need to bend down the emissions as a global society that we agreed for Paris Agreement target, this is very counterproductive, I would say. And the next slide, I would also show you that the unconditional target, how it would like if it's 1.5 compatible, it would be we as 1.5 fair share, and it's of course still far away. But under this unconditional target, as I mentioned earlier, the emission will go up until 2025 without international support. And I would say, in short, this is not a good news. We have to push for higher ambition domestically, that this is not only about where the emissions are, of course, because emissions going up is costing a lot of in our day-to-day life, in our economy, in our infrastructure as a country as well, which is very important. And the estimation on where the unconditional target should be is around 927 megaton CO2 equivalent per year, excluding LULUCF by 2030, and then slightly down to 823, which is very far. The gap is very big. And this is what we push for improvement from the side of IESR, that Indonesia should really put more ambitious conditional and unconditional target. We checked the new policy that regulates the use of carbon and also emissions level that just launched a few weeks ago. It's actually not including the equity. That's probably the reason why we see the alignment of 1.5 degrees Celsius differently, because they don't take into account equity element on establishing the standard or perspective on where 1.5 alignment to Paris are. And then the second, we would like to push for Indonesia to commit to binding Paris compatible phase out target, and actually enshrine it into policy along with proper institutional arrangements. There are a lot of political statements happening around since the new president take chairs, which are actually not in a policy or embedded in any policy or development plan yet, which would be very great if it's pushed through that. And putting or anchoring coal phase out target in the policy would give a very clear pathway on where we are going, whether or not we're going to bend down the emission, whether or not it's going to be fast enough, effective enough, or just enough. We push for government to at least put that in the NDC. And the third is to set an ambitious renewable energy target as well, along with strengthening its enabling environment for rapid development. I think Raina has also already mentioned this is key actions to be pushed for a high ambitions pathway. And Fabi also already mentions, IESR already mentioned so many times how immense our capability on doing this pathway. And then the fourth is to, of course, ensure implementation of methane pledge of cutting at least 30% from 2022 emissions level by 2030. It would be really great if government has a clear mandate on roadmaps and then embedded with policy and also institutional arrangement that are proper for the implementations of this. We already seen on Raina's presentations how the CH4 emission shares in Indonesia's emission pathway is, which is very big, and it's a pathway that it's a issue that we have to deal with because of the immense impact of the CH4. And then the last would be strengthening forest protections and governance to promote sustainable land and land use management, because again, we have very ambitious net policy target, while the trajectory or the emission trend are still positive. So it's kind of confusing, or I think people are not sure whether or not it's going to be achieved. But the fact is there that the land use and forestry are the backbone of our climate target. And I think before I close these my sessions, I would like to also connect on why meeting Paris Agreement is very important. Sorry? Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay, I would like to connect again on why meeting the Paris Agreement is very important. Sometimes we don't really connect what Paris Agreement is. I saw in the room we have media, we have academia, CSO, and probably just concerned people in this room with us. So I would like to connect it again beyond just the name of Paris. It's the reason why we need to push the government for raising ambition while the temperature, global temperature, is rising. So I would like to highlight a little bit about the IPCC latest IPCC report, not very latest, 2023, that the impact of this climate change will continue to intensify, like 3 generations that are exist today, also to 2060, 2090, they will experience a different harder level of globally. So your child, your nephew, your siblings would experience it even more severe. If now we are in Jakarta, it's already unbearably hot in the days, and then suddenly it's raining and flooding everywhere, and then we know some cities are sinking, and then there are a lot of physical damages caused by climate crisis. Also, it's affecting food production, and will end up affecting food costs as well. So this is what we have to see when we talk about Paris Agreement of meeting the global target of 1.5 degrees. It's not about the earth it's only, or the tree or the animals. It's about humanity, and the cause of and the result or the impact of global temperature is very injustice, that it affects us in the tropical country, which are developing country, which are consists of many vulnerable people that will face this daily. So that that I hope that increase the connections on why this is very important beyond the name of or target of Paris compatible, that often not very connected to people. So yeah, that's from me. I hope I give some insight for tonight and add some perspective on how our climate target right now. Thank you, Arif.
Delima, for your perspective, one key point that Delima highlight is Indonesia draft SNDC are not aligned with 1.5 degree target. And this is interesting topic, and I do believe that participants have a question for both speaker. But before that, I have a follow-up question to Dr. Rina and Delima. But I will come to Dr. Rina first, then Delima. Dr. Rina, you mentioned in the beginning presentation one of the major contributors to Indonesia emission is methane. Could you elaborate more on this and what activities that contribute mostly on this? And the second question is, you mentioned that emission trajectories don't differ much between the low and high GDP scenario. Could you maybe explain why this is the case? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for both questions. Yeah, so in terms of the methane emission, when we also just to clarify, kind of the chart we saw on my slide are based on a global emissions inventory in terms of the historical trend of Indonesia's emission. There are data uncertainty in terms of inventory, especially in the land use sector and in methane sector. So if you look at international versus domestic, even across different international inventories, there's always some discrepancy in terms of how much methane we're emitting. It's a challenge because like we have a pretty good knowledge about how much CO2 will be emitted from fossil use. It's very consistent emission factor. But for methane, you actually have a very a location-based emission factor, like from coal mine to coal mine, depending on the operation system, it could be very different. So it's hard to have a very accurate estimate of how much methane we're emitting. I think for Indonesia, both the energy sector, especially from coal mining, and also the waste sector have, I think Indonesia actually have a highest per capita waste sector methane when we checked across countries, which also have a local co-benefits. We think about, managing waste recycle or waste management for the local community. So I do feel like there could be some, both climate benefit, but also national development benefit in terms of addressing waste sector methane. But, both better MRV, but also some of the technologies, how to implement those in the domestic context is important. And for the second question on our modeling, I mentioned the population GDP are important input to our model, which will have drive like the demand. If you have higher income, you already have higher demand on energy service and transportation service and food service, and those will translate it to how much energy or different type of energy forms technology will meet those demands. And for the two GDP scenario variation, I think we definitely see there are policy priorities in Indonesia, thinking about some GDP growth targets, which we want to incorporate in our scenario, just to get a sense about how that may affect your energy demand and then translate to the emission outcome, and which we do see under the high GDP scenario. You have higher demand on transportation, for example, and in the near term, if not able to fully electrify the new growth in the demand, you will lead to higher emission in the near term. That have like an important implication in our modeling output.
So much, Dr. Rina, for your answer. And next, I will go to Delima. Delima, could you elaborate more why Indonesia relying heavy on the LULUCF sector for emission reduction, not good strategy or smart idea? Delima, could you hear me?
Hi. Okay. Thank you. Not so bad suddenly. Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah, very clear. But I will keep turning off my camera to save some bandwidth. So the question was, why is it not a good idea to rely heavily on carbon sinks? Basically, the forest has limit to sink carbon. There are a huge potential of its losing it by, for example, forest fire or old forest, for example. It's also not very efficient to sink carbon anymore. They would rather release. So heavily reliance on land use change or forestry in this regard, it's not very strategic. First, because Indonesia has high historical emissions of LULUCF emissions, and to keep up with the net sink target 2035, we need to do a lot of serious changes against deforestation, while the government has sacrificing the forest land. So that's so contradictory. And keeping the land itself intact, it's already hard. And then to go sacrifice that for development is also still the case in Indonesia. So this says a lot about Indonesia's strategy. And then a reliance on LULUCF also, in that case, divert attentions on the efforts from necessary emission reduction in other critical sectors, for example, energy, industry, or subsectors like transport. And in sectors like energy, we have proven technology, renewables that are going even cheaper right now, and also tested. It works in many countries, for example, in Europe. So we don't have to go through that pathway of keep destroying that for development anymore. And we don't have the budget to do so anymore for our economy or development. And LULUCF emission also are subject to large fluctuations and uncertainties, making it very difficult to accurately project and account for emission reductions. And then the second would be the lack of permanence. I think everyone's very familiar with these. The permanence of removal or carbon stored in the land system is very vulnerable, as I mentioned earlier. And Indonesia also planned to use the ocean-based carbon sequestrations, which I don't know if it's going to be used for offset emissions in other sector, but if that's the case, it would be the worst idea, I would say. I think that's, in short, why it's not a good idea for that. Indonesia has to be benefited from its sinks instead of doing carbon, I think, and there are a lot of uncertainty in that compared to reductions or measures in like energy sector, for example. I hope that answers. Arif, thank you.
Thank you, Delima, for your insight. I will back to Rina. You mentioned about the high emission trajectory that you mentioned earlier in the model. I explored about the likelibility how it implement to a sectoral policy. Are there a best practice to implement the massive renewable energy deployment required to reach this target, Rina?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question again?
Implement the massive renewable energy deployment required to reach this target, or is it still in the model or the scenario?
Yeah, thank you. That's also a great question. And of course, when we develop the high ambition scenario, we, take into account where countries are today, and where we want to be in terms of our net zero goal, and also trying to be in line with 1.5. So definitely, I would say our results definitely it's a high ambition pathway for Indonesia. Even you look at the non LULUCF part, it will still achieve 18 to 22% reduction by 2035 from 2023. That definitely require we stop the increasing trend for the non LULUCF part and start to decline very soon. So in our scenario, I presented the power sector being a key driver for the near term. That's actually very consistent across countries because now the technology is on the renewable side is really become cost effective for a lot of regions in terms of supporting the transition of the power system. And we already see a lot of good progress in neighboring countries. So for Indonesia, it is a important change from the current or historical trend in terms of renewable deployment. And in the modeling, I think we don't have perfect representation of implementation challenges in terms of the grid, the geographic challenges and the grid infrastructure for a specific country because we are global and also high economy-wide model. So a lot of the detail cannot be fully represented, but I do believe there are other tools we can use to represent those. But also just want to say there's barriers we identified in terms of the institution barrier, some of the investment financing challenges, and with the grid infrastructure. So all of that, I think maybe modeling is not the best tool to tell you in terms of implementation, but that give us some direction about where the targets we should thinking about to heading to, and then using other approaches to discuss what will be the solution part. But I do think a lot of the research I know IESR colleagues are looking into definitely thinking about what would be the best kind of strategies both on policy side and also on the finance investment side to overcome some of the near-term challenges on RE deployment. Indonesia have abundant solar resources. I do feel like there's a lot of great potential. Also thinking about distributed system for regions that are remote and hard to get to on the grid. So I think that's definitely a lot of probably expert in the audience can also offer some thoughts about how to overcome the RE deployment near-term barriers for Indonesia. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rina, for your explanation. And now, the last question, we have one question from participant, from Alan. As Indonesia prepares its second NDC on the road to COP30, the LULUCF sector remains central to the country emission reduction strategy. How is Indonesia planning to strengthen its LULUCF target and implementation, particularly in addressing deforestation, peatland restoration, and sustainable land management, while balancing economic growth and community livelihoods? Thank you. This question for Delima, but Dr. Rina, if you have any insight, please. You can first.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Actually, in IESR, we don't really work on LULUCF, so I don't know what's the latest status there is or are. But the narrative about keeping the net pollution target is still there, even though there are massive reports about mining extractions and also forest conversions to other land use or agroforestry or agriculture is still happening. So yeah, I don't see yet, but I don't know, maybe tomorrow the government will publish the specific or full measures on how they will keep this target alive, because the statistic looks pessimistic, and the government's plan for the food estate and then also the energy security is also concerned, not because the food estate or energy security or food security is bad, but how the measures or how the strategy to go there, it's a bit concerning, and we're still waiting for how it is gonna be. For now, that's what I know, and also there are a lot of roadblocks on implementation because of the limited financial gaps and also technical gaps. The government is now developing the national adaptation plan that will roll out very soon, I heard, and it's a great step to clear out how to get there, how to compensate those who are must be compensated the most, and also I think that it's very important to highlight how lack of funding are going to this sector, and there are a lot of injustice also happen because of the conflict in this sector to whether keep it or not keep it. It's causing so many problems around it, and the government also just renew their policy regarding the carbon trading, which shows a clear intentions of using the Article 6 on reaching their climate target. This could be a good news or not so good news, and the government also, I think, takes roles in the coming climate finance TFFF. I think they play a huge role as well in that, and have a chair on that. And I think, I think that's what I can say for now. It's not really my domain, and in general, that's what's currently happening on the national level, at least. Thank you.
We have some comment.
Yeah, maybe just very quickly. Also, LULUCF is not my expertise, but just I think I mentioned in the last part of my presentation, there are a lot of complex dynamics happening across different sector. When you're thinking about biofuel. For the energy transition, what the potential implication on the land use sector, it's very important. That's one example. I do think, sometimes also mining activity could have a potential implication as well. So I do want to just highlight the nexus across different sectors. We can put them in isolation when thinking about the target setting, but looking the economy-wide across sector, it's very important.
Thank you, Dr. Rina and Delima, for your answer. We are in the end of the session, but before we come to the conclusion, and as Delima mentioned, tomorrow the government will hold a public consultation for Indonesia's second NDC. Of course, we hope that the new document will reflect ambitious climate target. And in relate to that, I would like to ask closing statement from our speaker, and also would like to hear the recommendation for the government. What kind of the key element should be prioritized by the government in Indonesia, so Indonesia can have an ambitious and also implementable climate action? The first opportunity I will give to Delima.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a really good questions. I think whatever push is very necessary right now, because the time window is very short to 2020, 2030. It's very close to now. It's only just 5 years. If talking about the numbers, the level of emissions are too hard and not very connect or linear or relevant to you people in this room, I think it's still very important to push for whatever agenda that you feel close with. For example, how the government would ensure that the future of our life or our children or the future generation are having a good environment to live in as a basic human right, for example, one. And then the other thing is also to push the just transition element in the best way you know how, for example. And then the other thing would be, for example, for media to capture or to translate how actually climate crisis problem is that are actually very close to us. It's not about just Paris Agreement or just 1.5 or just saving the earth or just saving the forest, but it's also about our future, our life, and it's very close and very personal. And then other than that, I also already outlined in the presentation, I believe everyone can access it, that the government has to raise these ambitions. It is bounded by the Paris Agreement that the government has to show progressive actions and target towards Paris to meet the Paris Agreement, and then that it has to show the highest possible ambitions. And I didn't see that here right now because, as I mentioned, it would be easy to overachieve the target and not really driving real emissions, even though it's numerically improving. We see the emissions still going up. Instead of below 2019 target, it remains above 2019. Some of the countries has already decoupled. Some of the countries, like South Korea, they already reached peak, and I believe Indonesia could also do so. And therefore, Indonesia needs technical and financial help internationally and should not shy about it, should demand more about it for a simplified finance mechanism that are highlighting most on the grants instead of loan that would burden us in the future. I think basically that's what we have to push, and whatever improvement in the format and also transparency in the process also has to be established, and how they incorporate all level of society in the making of the target. And I think I will close it for now. That's already a lot. Thank you.
Dr. Rina?
For the question, I do want to say, just also internationally, it's a tough kind of a cycle for this round of NDC, given missing global leadership, usually from the United States. I think that's important to acknowledge. Like there's a lot of challenges in the global kind of a climate community to push countries' ambition, but because of this is nationally driven process, national priority should be in line with the high ambition, which Fabi also mentioned in his opening remarks. There's a great economic opportunity for countries like Indonesia to lead on the green economy, to lead on the green transition. I do think it's go together with reaching climate goal and also achieving a better future for the national interest, both on kind of the green economic development, but also for a better environment, a clear air, and also for affordable energy. I do think there are a lot of synergies on the national interest for Indonesia to start with a high ambition climate goal. And in the global agenda, I do feel like now there's probably about half of global emission are covered by new submission of target already. Some are disappointing, some are really encouraging. I do feel like several of the major economies are putting out ambitious targets, and that's still showing the potential good outcome we can get out of the Paris process. And Indonesia as a major economy does have an important contribution here. I do feel like both from the domestic angle and from the international angle, there's a lot of we can still try. I do feel like really appreciate AESR have been leading those conversation and the work in the domestic context for Indonesia, and I think that's a really amazing kind of impact we can potentially reach from this cycle. But also see what's been done in the past. I feel like if we if it's not just done by this submission, I feel like there are a lot of work to implement the target with a concrete policy plan, but also potentially to continue to raise ambition, for update, for ratchet ambition in the future cycle, even for another version of 2035. Yeah, so I do feel like we should just keep in mind of all those key moments and keep working through the process. And thank you. It's really a great pleasure to joining today's event.
Thank you, Rina. I would like to highlight two important points in this conclusion. The first is high ambition of second NDC can show Indonesia leadership. It set the tone for entire global south as well as contribute to national sovereignty and attract renewable energy investment if we have ambitious renewable energy target, particularly reflected in second NDC. And second is Indonesia overall emissions are still growing and there are option to improve emission reduction as mentioned by Rina and Delima in their previous presentation. And I also believe that the key point is the need of improvement and progress in second NDC. And once again, I would like to say a thank you to Dr. Rina and Delima. Your insight enlightened us regarding Indonesia climate commitment. Also to all participants who has stayed from the beginning to the end. I will stop here and give the floor to Angga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mas Arif, and thank you to all our distinguished speakers, Dr. Rina, Associate Director, Center for Global Sustainability, University of Maryland, and Mbak Delima from ISR for sharing such valuable insights. We also thank all participants for your engagement and thoughtful questions throughout the sessions. Before we close, I just wanted to remind and sincerely ask participants once again to fill out our feedback form, which has been shared through the chat. For you to fill out this form. Thank you very much. And before we close, let me once again extend our appreciation to everyone who joined in this important discussion. Today's webinar reminds us of the collective effort needed to ensure Indonesia's climate commitments are not only ambitious, but also credible and achievable. On behalf of ISR, thank you for spending your evening with us. We look forward to seeing you again at our next event on the road of COP30. Have a good evening, everyone. And Dr. Rina, have a good morning. Have a good day and stay. Bye-bye, everyone.